Two big topics today. First, workforce development. It's a priority in just about every state, but it is a big, complex orchestration of public-private partnerships, and it spans secondary, post-secondary, and adult education. Second topic is public leadership. I'd argue that it's also increasingly important and complex. This weekend, I was at a retreat where I thought about it as an expression of civics education, and I'm afraid it's underrepresented in high schools and college pathways these days. So, workforce development and public leadership. You're listening to the Getting Smart podcast. I'm Tom Vander Ark. Today, we're speaking with Jennifer Purcell about workforce and public leadership in Oregon. Jennifer directs Future Ready Oregon, which I learned about a couple of weeks ago, and I was so impressed. I wanted to know more. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tom. It's good to be with you.
I guess you'd agree that workforce development is a priority for just about every state. It seems like every governor runs on a jobs agenda. Is that fair?
It's absolutely a priority. And I would say taking it a step further, even for those policy priorities that are not directly workforce development related, there is a workforce component to ensuring that we can deliver on those promises.
It's interesting that this weekend I was thinking about Ohio combined their education and workforce department into a single entity to try to create alignment and goal clarity. And who knows, we may have the same thing at the federal level in the coming year. I wanted to dive into Future Ready Oregon. It is such a great example of what to me looks like a beautifully orchestrated state level response. What is Future Ready Oregon? Where did it come from? How in the world did you get it funded with more than $200 million? What's the origin story?
Sure. Future Ready Oregon started in the Governor Brown administration and is a package of investments that was passed by Oregon's legislature in 2022. It includes $200 million investment in education and training pathways that advance a more equitable workforce system in Oregon, as well as increase opportunities for diverse learners and workers. And the work for the package itself began in late 2021, really on the heels of the pandemic and a call for racial justice and equity across the country, and particularly in Oregon. And Governor Brown, under her leadership, established a racial justice council that was stood up and operationalized during the pandemic and included leaders from across the state, identifying challenges and opportunities across a number of policy areas. And what we found is that workforce issues, whether that's access to a diverse skilled workforce for employers, or access to the education and training opportunities that individuals in Oregon need to connect to high wage, high demand jobs, was a priority across policy areas. So it was an issue directly affecting health equity, directly impacting the economic competitiveness of many industry sectors. And in response, Governor Brown established a workforce work group within the Racial Justice Council to really identify strategies that would be effective in addressing a number of complex issues related to equitable access to and success in education and employment.
Where does Future Ready sit organizationally in the Oregon state administration?
The majority of the investments are administered by Oregon's Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And as you mentioned, Oregon is one of very few states that does include, in fact, the higher education system, colleges, universities, and the public workforce system under the administration of one executive branch agency. It really does provide, I think, a strategic opportunity for us to be aligning initiatives across the post-secondary education and training ecosystem. And the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, affectionately referred to as the HEC, is administering the majority of the Future Ready Oregon investments and then also responsible for providing the assessment and reporting on the outcomes of the investment. There's two pieces that are administered by other agencies. Oregon's Bureau of Labor and Industries administers and oversees and regulates registered apprenticeships in Oregon. And our Youth Development Division, or Youth Development Oregon, received a portion of the investment to advance youth re-engagement grants and opportunities to connect young people who are disconnected from the workforce and the education system to re-engage and connect them with education and employment opportunities.
Does the Higher Ed Coordinating Board have a history of grant making, or is this kind of a new function?
I would say it's a both and. We do have a history of grant making. I would say much of the investments in post secondary education are facilitated through the HEC to our community colleges and public universities. And then, of course, we have a number of state and federal investments that go to colleges, universities, are administered through Oregon's 9 local workforce development boards and the public workforce system. We do have some strategic innovation grants and other grant opportunities at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. But you can imagine an investment in approximately $165 million of the $200 million investment coming through the HEC was a sizable undertaking and required establishing practices and administrative infrastructure. And I would just say it's really important to note that the legislature and the Racial Justice Council charged the HEC with doing things differently,
Mm.
understanding that a one size approach fits all is really not meeting our workforce needs. And there are 8 program elements within Future Ready Oregon, and the HEC administers 6 of those. And so while we were standing up some of the administrative structure for that, we were also committed to continuous improvement in process and really challenging the status quo to ensure that we are addressing barriers to engaging with the state and engaging with education and training opportunities to reach diverse individuals.
Thank you for that. You just announced another, I think, $42 million worth of grants this week. So I'm just acknowledging that those look like really well crafted grants, and I'm noting that grant making of that type and of that scale are a unique set of skills. So I imagine some of that was new to the HEC. Thinking about Future Ready Oregon, is this unusual in its scope and scale compared to what other states are doing, or are most states doing work like this?
I think you're seeing more and more efforts that have similar components or combinations of the components. Some of what is unique about Future Ready Oregon is that coming again on the heels of the pandemic, we had the opportunity to invest both state general funds and federal ARPA funds, or American Rescue Plan Act funds, which made for the opportunity for the sizable investment. We were also able to respond to, again, that call for racial justice and equity in communities across the country and really lean into the purpose of advancing opportunities for diverse learners and workers in Oregon. What we are seeing across the national landscape is elements of Future Ready Oregon. So what's unique is that It pulls together a number of programs. The investments include local workforce development boards and our public workforce system. They include our community colleges, our public universities, and even in our most recent awards, a couple of private universities, and engage community based organizations in our workforce development system in new and innovative ways as equal partners in the process of providing workforce development services, serving as liaison between their communities and the organizations that are maybe traditionally structured to meet the workforce and talent development needs of the state.
Jennifer, let's talk about a couple of the specific aspects of Future Ready Oregon. At the top of the list, one of my favorite topics is these workforce navigators. What is that program about?
Absolutely. It's a key component, again, to that package of investments. The intention here is that in partnership with Oregon's 9 local workforce development boards, the HEC is investing in pilot projects that place benefits navigators within communities across the state to connect individuals to opportunities both in education and training, as well as connecting to resources that meet broad, comprehensive supports and basic needs for education and training participants. So, one of the things that we've found through these investments is that it's really critical to invest in organizations and their capacity to meet the needs and be responsive to the needs of individuals while also providing student supports. And it's critical that those student supports not only meet the education and training needs, but understand that students today look very different than students of 10 years ago. And in order to ensure equitable access to education and training and the successful completion of education and training, we really have to think about student and learner needs more. And those supports can look like offsetting the costs of transportation, providing for mental health needs. They can include access to technology, access to childcare, housing, and food security, in addition to maybe the more traditional supports around tuition and fees and workforce readiness supplies, making sure that individuals have the tools that they need to be successful both in education and employment.
Yeah, just a reminder that sometimes a bus fare can lead to a gap in training or employment. And so I appreciate the effort to coordinate workforce benefits. Does this also include guidance, sort of pathway career guidance?
Our local workforce development boards do a lot around career coaching, mentoring, resume development. And I think the other thing that's unique about a couple of both our Workforce Ready grant funded projects, the programs implemented by our local boards through Prosperity 10,000 and the Workforce Benefits Navigator is that organizations are looking for ways to meet people where they're at, and sometimes that looks like providing mobile services. And we do have a couple of organizations that have implemented what I would call a mobile workforce service provider that will go out into community and to places where people gather, like libraries and community centers and grocery stores, to connect people in community with the opportunities that are available both through education and training, but also career services, career supports, and connecting to individuals who can blend and braid those resources to support students and workers in either accessing opportunities or accessing opportunities that allow for upward economic mobility and advancement within career.
Two quick shout outs in this category of path guidance. Our friends at San Diego Workforce Board, workforce.org, are just a great example of a local workforce that's working hard to give personalized and localized guidance and Schools in districts like Cajon Valley really benefit from partnerships with their workforce boards where they can really give parents and students zip specific and personalized guidance. Second, this is a category that we see AI is going to provide a lot of benefit starting in 2025 of supporting both students and adult workers, providing path guidance and a combination of carrying human advisors and smart algorithmic advisors. We see big advances in and path guidance in 2025. Jennifer, a big part of your grant making was to support industry consortia in healthcare, manufacturing, and tech. I guess why those topics and why the focus on these industry consortia?
So, Future Ready Oregon, as I mentioned, included 8 components, and that included both grant programs and strategic initiatives. And I think about our industry consortia as a critical component of the strategic initiatives and the backbone of allowing us to identify barriers to accessing education and employment and implementing strategies, as well as building on the promising practices and identifying replicable and scalable strategies through our grant making. The industry consortia were established in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology as those 3 key sectors were identified in the legislation as experiencing critical workforce shortages and anticipating strategic workforce opportunities across those 3 sectors, and really in an attempt to strengthen Oregon's economic competitiveness. It's building on this strategy that having a statewide priority around investments and initiatives can really move the needle, and looking for ways that we can iterate and learn from regional sector partnerships that are very similar but focus on regional economies and communities. And our industry consortia really do take a statewide lens. What is unique about the industry consortia is it builds on this idea that is foundational to Future Ready Oregon, and that is a shared leadership model, where we believe that engaging employers and education and training providers and community partners in informing strategies and identifying critical workforce needs and high value credentials and barriers to access and advancement is it's the opportunity to co-create solutions to those complex workforce challenges. So our industry consortia include representatives from community colleges and universities, representatives from our K-12 education systems, other training partners from across the state that are sector specific. They include our local workforce development boards, other economic development partners, and community-based organizations that are providing sector-specific workforce development services with their communities. And I think one of the things that's unique about the most recent grant announcement is that this final round of funding, which amounted to approximately $42 million in workforce ready grants, was the priorities for that were informed by the industry consortia. So we've really had this opportunity over the last 2 years to weave together the 8 components of Future Ready Oregon, where we have education and training pathways that built on existing successful programs, such as career coaching and mentoring through our local workforce boards, such as post-secondary career pathways in our community colleges, credit for prior learning investments, and registered apprenticeships and youth programs built into that existing infrastructure, and coupled that with the opportunity to make investments in new and innovative approaches. And then through initiatives like the industry consortia and the workforce benefits navigators, we really pull all of that together, where Navigators are the connection points in community to connect individuals to the education and training and employment opportunities and resources to support them. And the industry consortia are convening to really be thinking about at a policy and a program level, how are we delivering workforce and talent development services in a way that we are advancing Oregon's economic competitiveness and providing opportunities for upward economic mobility and equitable prosperity for Oregonians.
I loved your recent release because it included so many really cool examples. Let me tick off a couple. So in health, Klamath High is launching a new health pathway, which we love. We've published a guidebook to health pathways. We'll include that in our show notes. And on a related front, Bushnell School of Nursing is launching a program to prepare bachelor degree level nurses to work in rural settings, which is a super important workforce need. In manufacturing, Clackamas Community College is working on expanding access to manufacturing careers, and there's also a very cool reentry program. And in tech, here my favorite one was the Afghan Support Network is preparing Afghan refugees to earn IT certifications and step into high wage employment. So it was a very cool set of grants. Obviously, a lot of work went into those.
And this was the third round. So we did have an initial round of that was funded through state general fund dollars and really focused on capacity building. We knew that if we were going to expand the partners that comprise our workforce system, we needed the opportunity to invest in those organizations, organizational capacity, invest in partnerships, and collective impact doesn't happen overnight, and acknowledging that takes some intentional investment and time to connect partners across the ecosystem, whether that be at a regional or hyper local level or at a statewide level. The second round of funds really built on that opportunity and looked at how can we advance innovative collaborative partnerships in education and training across those three key sectors of healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. And then you're absolutely right. The consortium have been convening for a little better than a year now and really helping to build the HEX sector specific expertise around education and training and looking for opportunities to that co-creation of solutions. Really immediately in the healthcare space, we knew that nursing career pathways were going to be a priority, but we also identified that in communities across the state, some of the critical workforce shortages are fairly unique to that community itself. And so that consortia recommended that our third round of funding provide for both opportunities. So about half of the healthcare grants went to advancing nursing career pathways, and about half went to programs that addressed community identified healthcare workforce needs. In the manufacturing consortium, we heard broadly from partners that Oregon's diverse manufacturing landscape has some shared workforce needs. And so, really focusing on how do we provide for career exploration and career awareness in Oregon's diverse manufacturing sector and focus on transferable manufacturing skills, but also the consortium identified the value of earn and learn opportunities. And so those investments also incentivized projects that connected adult learners to opportunities that would allow them to earn and learn simultaneously. And then in technology, what we found is that not only are we talking about tech occupations within the tech sector or pure tech employment, we're also talking about tech occupations across all of Oregon's employment landscape. And so their priorities focused really on those transferable technology skills and occupations that meet the needs of all employers in Oregon. And those investments looked at career exploration and introducing individuals to career opportunities in tech, but then also thinking really strategically about the opportunity to connect incumbent workers to upskilling or reskilling in technology as we're looking at the demand for tech skills increasing and the need for tech literacy increasing across all occupations. It was an opportunity for us to identify some projects that would allow for adult learners to connect to those upskilling or reskilling opportunities to improve competitiveness in the workplace.
We're talking to Jennifer Purcell, Director of Future Ready Oregon. Jennifer, there's 4 other programs that I love that I just want to give a shout out to. You can pick one of these to add an exclamation mark. The Community College Career Pathway is a great grant idea. The Credit for Prior Learning program, I told you before that I love that. I appreciate that you're working hard on expanding that capacity. $10 million grants to Oregon youth development organizations. And then finally, the big grant to expand registered apprenticeships. Which of those is your favorite child?
I can't pick a favorite. And really, I mean this when I say this. These 8 programs work together so strategically. I think what's important to note is that not only does a one size fits all approach not work for meeting our workforce needs, but it's the both and approach that is so successful. What works for one individual may not work for another individual in the same way that the supports that we're providing are unique to an individual's needs. To offset the cost of transportation in one community might look like a bus pass, but in another community, it might look like a gas card. And I think programmatically, it's the same thing. The Prosperity 10,000 investments through the local workforce development boards are really building that community driven, regionally driven workforce services ecosystem and partnerships. And the post secondary career pathways are really a critical component for a couple of reasons. They were a model for the connection of education and training with wraparound supports and services. And much of what we're seeing implemented through Workforce Ready grants, for example, is modeled after that idea that we need to couple education and training with wraparound supports and holistic, comprehensive supports of students. I can't pick one program over the other because they're all so integrated and interrelated and interdependent.
Jennifer, in this last segment, I want to talk about public leadership. Future Ready Oregon just strikes me as a super thoughtful, strategic, timely public response to a changing landscape. And that's really why I wanted to highlight it on this podcast. And you, as a public leader, have just really impressed me as somebody in the right place at the right time, doing really important difference-making work. Somebody who is smart and humble and thoughtful and collaborative. The idea of being a director of a state initiative just doesn't show up on pathways in high school or college. And so I'm curious to get the short version from you of it. How did you pivot from a business career here in the state of Washington to the public administration role that you have leading Future Ready Oregon?
I couldn't be more proud of the career pathway that I'm on and inspired by the opportunities that I get to engage in as a public administrator. You're right. I did start my career in the private sector. And what I think is that in my early public service days, what made me effective as a public leader was the fact that I was approaching it with an entrepreneurial spirit. And I bring that ethos to my work in the public sector every day. I had the opportunity to move to Oregon and spent the better part of the last 2 decades in the Tillamook County area, the North Oregon coast, and dove right into community service and civic
Great.
engagement. When I started in leadership, was volunteering in with the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Council, and just looking for ways to participate in the community. And it was over that time that I got involved with the Economic Development Council and some of their event planning, and then moved into state government, where I had the opportunity to serve as a regional coordinator focused on community and economic development, and then moved into the governor's office, where I served as a regional economic and community development coordinator for a period of time, and then had the privilege of assuming the workforce portfolio that then at that time included the development of Future Ready Oregon.
Jennifer, along the way, you did an MPA at Portland State. Was adding that credential, what was that, an important learning experience or an important signal, or not?
Can't appreciate more my time at Portland State University. I did do that as a mid-career professional. So a few years ago, returned to complete my graduate degree through the Hatfield School of Public Service. And I think during that time, I had the unique opportunity to really bring a framework to and better articulate the work that I was doing in public service. I appreciated the opportunity to put a framework to the work that I was doing, and that program in particular was a cohort model, and I had the privilege of learning from a number of very talented colleagues across state government, local government, and community organizations that just inspired me. And it was a great platform then for me to launch into the work that I've been doing in workforce and talent development, and really allowed me to hone in on my interest in that intersection between economic development and workforce and talent development.
It's a beautiful pathway story. I love how it started with volunteering at the local level and moved into a professional role, and how you went back to school and moved from a local level to a state level. And so this combination of entering where you can make a difference and then scaling your impact, combining it with continuing education. Is public administration something that you can advocate for? Is it something you tell young people to consider as a career pathway?
Absolutely. I believe really strongly in leading from where you're at and growing where you're planted. And that can look in a variety of ways. That can look like volunteerism. It can look through the lens of career. But I absolutely encourage folks and provide coaching and mentorship to not only to young people, but to folks who might be thinking about changing career. In fact, the really remarkable team that we've built at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission that's administering the Future Ready Oregon programs, the vast majority of them come from the private sector. And it's been a really exciting opportunity to build into these individuals' public service career. And I have had the privilege of coaching and mentoring a number of individuals who are interested in pursuing public service, public administration, either in a volunteer capacity or as a profession.
Jennifer, as we close, I'm wondering if there's a person or two that have been a public leadership mentor to you, somebody that has inspired you on this journey.
There are probably too many to name, but a couple that come to mind and I pay tribute to as they are both no longer with us, but the former mayor of Nehalem, Shirley Calcoven, was a mentor to me when I was in my early public service journey, and the opportunity to work under her guidance and direction really instilled in me a high value for community engagement and the importance of providing opportunities for diverse individuals to contribute to the policymaking conversation and really hearing from individuals who are impacted by the decisions that our policymakers and public administrators make every day, and that lives with me. The other would be Patsy Richards, who was actively engaged in the development of Future Ready Oregon and instilled in me a very strong commitment to continuous improvement and questioning the status quo, understanding impacts and outcomes, and iterating and reiterating based on what we're learning to really push the dial on equity. And those two women have made an indelible impact on my life and my public service.
Jennifer Purcell directs the Future Ready Oregon, just a terrific, timely, thoughtful, strategic program of work in the state of Oregon. And Jennifer is a great example of a public leader doing important work across the state. Jennifer, thanks for sharing your time and story with us today.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks to Mason Pasha, our producer and the whole Getting Smart team for making this possible. Until next week, keep learning, keep leading, keep innovating for equity. See you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.